In Algebra 1, Section 3.3, we're dealing with writing functions. So we're going to be relating two sets of data, but now we're going to be looking for specific functions in order for us to be able to predict more values. Okay? So the first one is asking us to determine a relationship between x and y values and to write an equation. So basically, we have to identify the pattern of x and pattern of y and somehow connect them. So if we look at x, okay, we can tell that 5 is, this is going by 5, 10, 15, 20, okay, and this is going by ones. Okay, this is going by 5s and this is by 1s. But we're not only trying to find a pattern of x and y individually, we're trying to relate how they relate to each other. So it seems like for every y, x is 5 times bigger. So if I do 5 times y, then I get 1x, right? How do I know if this is right? Well, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to check it. I'm going to take, let's put it here. Let me try the second one. I'm going to put in 10 for x. So 5y equals 10. So then I'm going to solve for y. Oh, these cancel out and I end up with y equals 2. So that's right. The reason why I use the second one is because I use the first one to find the pattern, so I want to make sure it applies to all of them. So I can write it 5y equals x, but sometimes people would rather have y by itself because we're going to be dealing with equations where y is isolated. So I can also write it y equals x over 5. So instead of saying 5 is y, 5 times y, I'm saying x is 1/5 of y, which is about saying, it is saying the same exact thing, it's just writing it differently. So any of these equations would work in order to relate it. So again, I'm not looking for patterns specifically as x individually or y individually. I'm looking for how they're related to each other. Number 2, we need to identify the independent and dependent variables. So in this, since you've already done the vocabulary, you should know the independent variables are variables that go on, okay, without depending, where the dependent variables depends on the independent variable. For example, if I'm driving, okay, the distance I'm driving depends on the time that's gone by. If there's no time that goes, if time doesn't move on, then I don't drive any distance. But even if I don't drive anything, time will always move on. Does that make sense? So in this case, time is independent. It doesn't need my driving, but my driving needs time. Because basically, if time stood still, nothing would move, okay? So in this one, a painter must measure a room before deciding how much paint to buy, okay? So in this case, what will be independent? It doesn't depend on the other. Well, definitely, the size of the room, it doesn't matter whether I'm going to paint it or not. The size of the room will always be the size of the room. So the size of the room is my independent. Okay? And then what depends on it is my paint. Okay? So my paint is my dependent. Here's why it's important for you to be able to figure out, to decide what's my independent and dependent. They're not always going to label x and y for you, so you need to know which one is your x and which one's your y. Your independent, things that go on no matter what, time, okay, the measure of the room, all that is independent. This will always be your x value. Your paint, the thing that depends on the independent, that's your y. So my independent is my x value, and my dependent is my y value. Please make sure that's in your notes. Okay? The next one, the height of a candle decreases every hour. Okay, this one, no matter what, okay, time will always be independent, okay? So that means time will always go on. So the number of hours, which is our time, is our independent. Okay? And how much the candle decreases is my dependent. I got lazy. My apologies. So go ahead and write it, and please remember your independent, okay, is the one that goes on its own, is your x value. Your dependent is your y value because it depends on the x, the independent. Go ahead and write this down. I have one more board. Number 3, identify the independent and dependent variables and write an equation in function notation. So, function notation is basically, if you see an equation y equals 2x plus 3, let me put here, function notation is f of x. Okay? They replace each other. So I'm going to get y by itself and I'm going to replace it with f of x. So let me explain how that goes. F of x is written f parentheses in x, okay? So a math tutor charges $35 per hour, okay? Again, hour, number of hours, is our independent, because it's time, all right? $35, okay, the charge is my dependent. Okay? So it matters on how many hours in order for me to find the charge. I can't have the charge without the hours, but I can still have the hours without the charge. Okay? So this is my x. And this is my y. Right? That's my x and that's my y. So that means for every, I know how much to charge my y, okay? I know how much to charge because I'm going to charge $35 for every hour, my x. So here's my equation. But this is my set equation. But what I'm going to do is they want me in function notation. So the only difference between this and function notation is I'm going to replace this with f of x. And this is my answer. Please understand that this does not mean f times x. I can't separate that by dividing by x. Okay, I can't just divide by f on both sides and x by itself. That's not how it works at all. This is just a symbol, just like pi, just like y, just like x. This is one symbol connected together. All right? So, a gym charges $100 in initiation plus $40 a month. So in this case, how many months is my x and how much I charge is my y. So my total charge y, okay, I start off with $100 because no matter what I'm going to be paid $100, but I have to add on $40 for every month. Now I don't know how many months, but I know that my month is represented by x. Okay? And the only way to do this y, I have to, the only answer that I can do function notation, the only thing I need to do is replace y with f of x. So it's going to look like f of x equals 100 plus 40x. And that's my equation. The next one, number 4, asks us to evaluate for g of t 1.5t minus 5. Hold on one second. Okay, calculator. And it says find gt when t equals 6 and when t equals 2. So basically, they want me to plug 6 in for t. So what it looks like is, you see this t on the inside? I'm going to replace it with the number I want to replace. So f of 6 equals 1.5t minus 5. Here's the thing. A lot of people will get confused with this and you want to solve this. It's not at all. This is just telling me I need to replace everything on this side with everything that's t with 6. Okay? I don't need to bring anything on this side. This is already isolated, so you have to leave it alone. Don't try to separate f and 6. I know it sounds annoying that Ms. P is constantly repeating it, but it's a big mistake that people keep having. They keep thinking that, oh, I'm just going to divide both sides by f. No. This is one symbol. It's just telling me to replace t with 6. So I don't need to worry about the other side. I just need to plug in and solve. So 1.5 times 6 minus 5. So I'm going to do 1.5 times 6. Which is 9 minus 5. Some of you guys did that in your head and you're probably ashamed of me. Sorry about that. 9 minus 5 is 4. So what that's saying is that my f of 6 equals 4. The only thing that's telling me is that if I replace 6 for t, my answer would be 4. This would be the same thing as saying y equals 4. Same thing, because these are interchangeable. So that's my answer. But it's also telling me to find y when it equals, find t when it equals -2. Okay, so I do f of -2 equals 1.5t minus 5. So in this case, it's 1.5 times -2 minus 5. Okay? So we have 3, -3 minus 5. -3 minus 5 is -8. So this is saying f of -2 equals -8. Our last one says Joe has enough money for 1, 2, or 3 DVDs at $15 each. Write a function and find a domain and range. Well, we know that Joe can only spend, Joe can spend between 1 to 3 DVDs. That's how many DVDs he can buy, okay? So it's that my equation is y, how much he spends, depends on $15 for every CD, okay? So y is money, and then x is DVD, okay? So when I put here, he can spend $15, $15, $30, or $45. He can do 1 to 3, so his domain, his x's, is 1 through 3. His x's is between 1 and 3. Okay? But his range is, if he spends 1, he'll spend $15. If he spends 2, he'll spend $30. If he spends 3, he'll spend $45. So his range is y is between $15 and $45. Right? So this is the answer for that. Go ahead and write this down. Try page 183, numbers 3, 8, and 10. 183, numbers 3, 8, and 10, and I will see you in class.